Welcome back to the Notaku Anime Chat, where your Onichans and Onechans are seriously off limits. I'm your host, Setsuken, joined by the one who is perpetually lost in anime, Guardian Enzo.
Hey, how you doing?
And so today we're going to finally revive the podcast. We'll kind of go through some of the new format stuff that we're thinking and introduce the new show to you guys, basically. And from there, we'll talk about some news, some changes, and eventually we'll get into why we're doing this crazy, bizarre experience all over again. So let's get into it. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we are going to kind of do a new show. And one of the sections that we're going to start off with is basically what we're watching every week. In this section, we'll both talk about, something that we feel is notable to talk about. We obviously can't mention everything that we're watching because I don't know about Guardian Enzo, but I watch a lot of anime, and you guys all don't need to know about every single thing I watch down to the minute. So, we'll go with that. And in fact, just to kind of put Guardian Enzo in the hot seat, I'm going to kick it over to you,
Okay.
Guardian Enzo. You start with something notable that you're watching these days.
Well, let me first say it would take a lot less time to list everything I'm watching now than it would have a couple of years ago. But something notable that I'm watching right now, boy, if we're not going to count Great Pretender, which is on hiatus at Netflix, I'm going to say Major Second Season 2, which is by far my favorite of the current shows I'm watching. I love Major. I love sports anime, and I really like this. Is a very classic sports anime in old school by an old school mangaka with a great director in Watanabe Shinichiro. Excuse me, not Watanabe Shinichiro Watanabe Ayumu. Excuse me. But what makes this one kind of interesting and different is the main character is very much atypical for Major. His father was the classic sports anime protag. This kid is very humble, very self-effacing. In baseball terms, he's a grinder. He doesn't win by flash, but he wins by supporting his teammates and by playing the game in a smart way, which I think makes a very interesting change to see an author who had a huge success for over 20 years doing things a certain way completely change direction with the way he's doing the sequel. So I'm enjoying that aspect of it.
Awesome. When you mentioned Shinichiro Watanabe, I got excited for a second.
Yeah, well, if you ask me, in the last 10 years, the other Watanabe, who I think I'm doing him an injustice even using that, but Ayumu has actually done more good anime in the last decade than Shinichiro has, in my opinion. Although I would never dismiss Shinichiro's contributions historically. He's one of the greatest of all time. But, Terror and Resonance and Carol and Tuesday do not exactly instill a lot of confidence in his recent work. Although I'll give you Space Dandy, especially season 2.
Yes, I actually agree with you. And for the anime viewers, well, this is our hot takes, and they start right here, right now. So get comfortable.
Okay. Yeah, why spare the opinions, right? We're here to give our opinions, so let's go all out.
Yep. So on my end, the show that I want to talk about is ReZero, season 2, and the reason I'm enjoying that one and the reason I want to highlight that one is because it is really bringing me back to a moment where I haven't been in a long time, where I'm actually exceedingly excited for a show to come out every week. And the reason for that is ReZero is unpredictable. It's actually a sequel that's delivering on a lot of the promise that the first series kind of developed and established. And I know, Guardian Enzo, you don't like light novel adaptations, but that kind of plays into why I love this show. It's a light novel adaptation that goes counter to all the tropes that we kind of associate with light novels or light novel adaptations that make them kind of the bottom of the barrel in terms of the anime industry. So ReZero actually, even though it's an isekai show, it explores themes that I think every one of those shows should. And then it's also like obviously very dark, and it's got a very unpredictable plot, and it's very character focused. So it's been nice after if you've ever followed some of my blogging stuff on animeevo.net, for any of the viewers there, you'll notice that over the last 2 or 3 years I've been disappointed and disappointed and disappointed with sequels. So it's nice to finally get one that actually is good.
Well, I'm happy for you. And of course, the show I picked is a sequel too. And this is a season of sequels, to be sure. All of the big discussion shows this season are pretty much all sequels. And Ray Zero specifically, I got through. I tried about 7 or 8 episodes the first season, and I really tried to embrace it. The same as I did with Yahari, the same thing, which is another big name sequel this season. And
Yes.
I tried really, really hard, and it just didn't happen. So you can't force it. You can't force it.
No, you definitely can't. And one of the things that I've learned as I've grown older and hopefully wiser is that it's okay if the anime that you love isn't vibing with like somebody else that you really like as a person or that you really respect. A lot of how we consume media and enjoy media is dependent on our personal life experiences, our tastes, our biases, and so the fact that you don't like a show that's very popular, trust me, man, I've got so many hot takes. Just mention the word Evangelion and let me go off on how much I don't appreciate that franchise.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing about Evangelion is you don't get a lot of neutrality with that show. It tends to elicit strong feelings one way or the other. I love Eva, but I'm the first to concede that it's an incredibly bloated franchise that's probably gone on for a lot longer than it should have. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Our worldview shapes our perspective as a fan, and that's something that's always going to be true. I would argue, maybe this is a topic we'll talk more about in future weeks, but I would argue that anime used to be a great reflection of that because of how much genre and tonal diversity it had, and I think that's become less true, unfortunately, in the last couple of years. As the focus of the medium has gotten narrower and narrower, it's gotten harder and harder to embrace all of those different sorts of fans because a lot of them have been left out in the cold. Um, and that sense of being left out in the cold, when you do get a show that you love, the way you love Ray Zero, the way I love Major, that makes it all the more special because you feel like you're literally being embraced, you know, welcomed back into the fold. So, that's a big thing for me to be in a position where I really, really, really appreciate when I find an anime now that meshes with me because honestly, it seems to be happening less and less often. So, and this is not a golden era for sports era anime to begin with, although you still get your couple of sports anime a year. They still happen, but so yeah, I'm happy whenever someone I like is happy. That's my viewpoint, and even if I don't quite get the love for a show, at least I can appreciate that it's making people happy, as this one clearly is. So
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I have to say, I enjoy the fact that you're leaving small seeds here and there for things that we will most undoubtedly be talking about in the future.
yes.
Um, One thing that I do want to quick talk about is, the fact that, as you mentioned, it's nice to, with the way the world is kind of on fire right now with, the pandemic, and even though some countries are kind of coming out of it, it's nice to have nice things. So
Hmm.
that's a positive note to end on, despite, the wealth of negativity that we could probably look at with terms of like anime industry quality, and all that other stuff. Uh,
Yeah, and it was rough too because as anime production really, this is not intended to be a segue, but it could be. But as the anime production really slowed to a crawl, it came at a time when people most desperately needed the distraction.
Right.
So you had that taken away from you right at the moment when you most needed something to cheer you up and take your mind off of more serious matters. So when people dismiss that kind of thing and say, oh, sports is not important, anime is not important, who cares if there's no English Premier League, who cares if there's no Major League Baseball? Well, it is important because it may be actually even more important at the time when those things are taken away. That's the real tragedy of it, because those are the moments when you most desperately need something to lift your spirits, and that too is gone. It's kind of a double whammy, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Um, and I like the idea of the segue. So, to kind of close off this discussion, the one thing I wanted to kind of state and kind of ask you as well, at least for me, even though a lot of our anime and a lot of our entertainment got lost in the pandemic for various reasons that I think we'll definitely talk about as we get into the next segment. Um, but I at least found myself going back and watching shows that I haven't seen in years
Me too.
and really kind of rediscovering my love of the medium and anime. And one of the reasons why I think this podcast exists right now is because my fandom has been renewed by that. So I'll kind of mention a series that or two series that I watched that really kind of reinvigorated me, and then I'll kick it over to you and ask what you've been potentially rewatching, and then we'll kind of
Mm,
end that segment. So one of the shows that I watched recently was Monster. I rewatched that one,
mm,
um, and I honestly forgot how intricate and good it is. It's got some weird political messaging that I never detected as a teenager, but it was definitely just the intricate plot work and the thrillingness and how long it was. That was like really refreshing to see. So it was nice to kind of see how, and it was very different. It was set in Europe, it was set in Germany, and it featured themes that I don't think we get this often. So it was nice to kind of go back and watch that. So that's the one I'll talk about today. But was there anything in particular that you watched or rewatched that struck a chord with you?
Well, actually, what I did, because I was so starved for content, is I actually opened it up to my readers and took a poll on the website and asked them what old shows would you like, stuff from before I started blogging, which was 10 years ago now, 2010. So stuff from pre 2010. And it ended up getting framed around 2007, which was, what I considered to be the greatest year in the history of anime. So I put up a bunch of shows and asked them to vote. And I ended up doing three shows that were a mix of what they picked and what I picked. So their pick was Bacano. So I rewatched that and covered it on the blog.
Fantastic series.
It is,
Sorry.
and way better than Durarara, in my humble opinion. Just
I
just
agree.
just to
I
throw that
agree.
out there. But really, a fun, very interesting genre piece. That is a light novel adaptation. In fact, although it's from an era when light novels were arguably a little different than they are now. Like Boogie Pop is another example of that. And then, of course, Gurren Lagann was another one that got a lot of votes, and I hadn't seen that in a very long time. And that's been fun to rewatch and to blog about. To be honest, parts of it feel a little dated, but it's still an incredibly fun show that was a lot more politically and just thematically intricate than you thought when it started. And
Really?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And have you seen it?
I've seen it. It was for the longest time. It was my favorite anime ever,
Yeah,
and I have not seen it in like 10 years now.
yeah.
So I think it's about time for me to go revisit that one.
It's a good one to blitz too. I mean, you can blow through it pretty quickly. Although I've been pacing myself just because, like I say, part of the reason I'm doing it is for material. But yeah, because you think it's going to be a certain show, and random things happen. I guess we won't spoil in case anyone hasn't seen it yet. But things happen, and the show goes off in different directions. And this happens multiple times. So that's another one, and then the last one is Seirei no Morabito, which is my favorite anime of all time, which was kind of a no brainer for me once I got on the 2007 scheme. It is to me literally the greatest anime ever made. It's an astonishingly beautiful anime visually. It looks great. Even 13 years later, it looks better than 95% of what's produced now. Incredible music. Just the it's a personal story with an element of fantasy, but the fantasy supports the characters, not the other way around. It's just it's to me that one is just I lose all ability to be impartial. It's fantastic. I love it beyond all measure. So really, those are the three: Bacano, Sere no Moribito, and Gurren Lagann. Those are the three I've rewatched.
A very, very strong selection. And from my perspective, having seen all three of them, highly recommend watching them. So we'll kind of
Wrong.
end this segment with that
Okay.
positive note because, yeah, you mentioned some of the strongest anime series that I've ever seen. So,
Mm,
so that was a perfect kind of closer to this.
awesome.
So, with that said, let's move on to our next segment,
Cool.
which I like to call.
The anime news.
All right, so as we kind of mentioned before, this is the anime news segment or notable anime news segment at the very least. So this section is kind of new for our podcast. We've generally only done topical conversations before, but something I kind of want to add to the anime chat, Guardian Enzo, is some kind of news that will kind of inform the viewer because even myself listening to a lot of anime podcasts, watching anime YouTube channels, and consuming anime, I actually don't read up on news very often. So the intention behind this segment is really to kind of like give our listeners the quick hits or the highlights of what they should be kind of keeping an eye on. And, these are kind of up to the host each week. This week I'm doing it, so I pick these. But so if I missed anything, it's all my fault. Guardian Enzo is innocent. And do not bring any pitchforks towards him.
That just keep that in mind for future reference, listeners. That rule should apply at all times.
Okay, so let's get into the news then. So we'll be talking about a variety of different things, a lot of them related to COVID. And on that note, the first thing that I actually want to talk about is this story over at Crunchyroll.com, written by Daryl Harding. Um, and the title reads: ReZero animation director says TV anime production moved to home after episode 5. Animation director Naoki Hiramura, who worked on episode 5 of the current season of ReZero, tweeted out last night about the current state of production for the TV anime series during the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, mimicking the sentiment shared by a lot of the anime industry in Japan at the moment. The translation of his tweet reads: I worked on episode 5 of ReZero as an animation director. After this episode, I've been completely cooped up at home working on the series because of the coronavirus, and I'm still stuck indoors. And then the article goes on to say that, ReZero is still continuing and that, viewers can see the first of this work from home version starting next week right on Crunchyroll. So they're kind of plugging themselves and they're mentioning that, don't get worried about the fact that, this is happening. But I wanted to start with this story because obviously we'll be talking a lot about COVID and we've lost a lot of series. I think COVID completely obliterated the last season. So, Guardian Enzo, I kind of want to ask you what you think of this and what you think of anime being potentially produced from home because it seems like COVID isn't going away anytime soon.
Now, before we go on, what is this COVID you keep talking about? I've never heard of it. No, I'm just kidding, of course. So this is important. Um, I think when you look at the way anime is produced, and I'm certainly not an expert on that, but maybe if you stop 20 people at Grand Central Station, I'd know more than half of them. But I certainly don't consider them myself an expert. But the animation director portion of the exercise, I don't see any reason why that can't be done from home. Really, And a lot of that side of production can in fact be done in remotely, and any sort of remote work has been a big taboo in Japan for a long time. They've been very slow to adapt to it. But the COVID epidemic has actually sort of pushed the country in that direction for the first time. And I suppose if you want to look for silver linings, that might be one. In talking to people within the industry, the big stumbling blocks as far as production as a result of COVID is the stuff that's a lot harder to do remotely, which would be one, the voice recordings, which that's been a challenge because they need professional studio environments in order to do professional sounding voice recording. And in anime, unlike most Western animation, there's a big focus on having the actors together so that they can work off each other. So that's been a big delay. And the other thing is compositing has been something. Compositing. This is where you get into the technical side of it. That's a little beyond my ken, but it basically combining the various visual elements, the CGI, the traditional, the key animation, the in betweens. That's because that's a collaborative process to a large extent. I think in anime that's been harder to do remotely as well. But we've seen the industry sort of recovering. Um, and I think one of the reasons why it's recovering, even as the country itself is sort of dealing with a second wave right now, is that they have been flexible and they have been working more from home environments, and whatever can be done remotely, they've been doing remotely. Now, I was not aware of this situation specifically with Ray Zero until you mentioned it, but I think it's a great development. And if they do it and make it work, and most importantly, if it proves to be cost effective, because as we know, budget is everything in anime, that may prove to be a big incentive for other productions to follow suit, to get to do more of it as we go forward, because the pandemic itself is not going anywhere for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned a very important aspect about Japanese society in that they are very much very office centric in the way their society revolves and the way life there revolves.
And your
It's all
hanko.
about being at work and
Don't
stuff like
forget, yeah,
that.
don't forget getting your
And
Hanko stamp. That's been a
sorry.
big stumbling block, is people having to go into the office, because if they don't go into the office, they can't get their supervisor to stamp the Hanko on their to show that they did their work or that they showed up for work. It's that's been a big frustration even for me in my own job, having to go into the office during the summer when the operation itself was shut down because they wanted people to get their Hanko stamp, which is as classically Japanese a conundrum, I think, as you'll ever find. And I don't know of any other country in the world really that even still uses the Hanko stamps. China has certainly gotten rid of them, which is another kanji country. Um, the whole idea behind the Hanko originally really was because with kanji you don't have a signature per se. Um, but yeah, so yeah, but you're right. Culturally speaking, this is a big hill for Japan to climb. It is a very office centric culture, and but current events make demands of us. They require us to adapt. And if anime is able to adapt in this way, I think it has many structural problems, but that would be a positive sign for the industry as a whole, for sure. And it's nice to see some strides being made. I think there's still a long way to go, but it's nice to see some strides being made.
For sure. And for the listeners who are tuning in for the first time, Guardian Enzo currently lives in Japan, so that perspective is something I am definitely curious about. And I'm going to be leveraging very often in this podcast. So yes, that is very very interesting to note. I had actually not heard about the fact that they literally
And a
stamp
lot of
your
jobs, yeah, a lot of
attendance. It
jobs.
seems
Yep.
like. Wow, that's crazy. I haven't had an attendance stamp since high
Yep.
school. and I think even then I didn't get most of them. So I would be a complete failure in Japan. I am very irregular in how I live my life and do things. So, uh, yeah, for all those people that are excited about Japan, and it is a fantastic place, it creates some of the best media in our time, I think. They're definitely backwards in some ways, and I think it's interesting to see that COVID and the pandemic, it's brought a lot of pain and death and sorrow in the world, but I think it's also pushing, at least it seems, the anime industry
I hope.
to adapt
Yeah,
and
I
evolve.
hope.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and the one thing that I'm a little worried about is whether the quality of the shows will continue to remain the same. I know in the spring, that entire season basically just either got cancels or delays for the shows. So I think they're past the point where they can do that without completely cratering everything.
I mean, there were a couple of spring shows that managed to run through their broadcasts, but it's mostly because their production schedules were unusually for anime very far advanced. Like yesterday, well, Tate managed to do its entire broadcast run, but that was almost finished before it even started airing, as far as production is concerned. And Nami yo Kite Kure was another one that managed to keep going. And actually, it should be noted, Fruits Basket has not had any hiatuses as far as I'm thinking back, but I think Fruits Basket has gone straight through without any breaks as well, which to me is kind of surprising. So, um, that some studios have managed, and I think what that tells us is the importance of an unanime like sane production schedule where you're not racing to meet deadlines every week, where you have some wiggle room built in because you have a lot of stuff already done well before the airing date. And any Netflix show typically has had that going because Netflix production schedules are notoriously, for anime standards, much more advanced than the traditional production committee productions are.
Yes.
Sure.
And so we'll kind of move on from there. I think we'll definitely discuss COVID more and more, but I want
Mm.
to turn over, since you mentioned Netflix, to the next item on our list, which
Yay.
is actually Beastars, a show that I think we'll talk about a great deal. But basically, season two was announced that it's going to
Thank
premiere
God.
in January of 2021. So next year. Um, I actually have not finished Beastar season one. I watched like the first three episodes, and I was just in a zone where it was starting to creep me out a
It
little
is.
bit with like how unique it is. So, but yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yes, that was not a traditional Netflix one in that it actually premiered on TV in Japan at the same time that it appeared on Japan Netflix. So it was really only in the West. Like for example, Great Pretender, that dumped like 14 episodes on Netflix before it ever even started really airing, even on Japanese TV. So Beastars is one I was following on a weekly basis as it came out, and it was a show I'm pretty. It is creepy. It is weird. It's not uh, it's not a show that I think is fully. It part of the charm of it for me is that you get the sense that the mangaka is not even exactly sure what she thinks about some of the stuff that goes on in that show. She's more or less putting it out there because she's thinking about it even as she's writing it. But I liked it to the point where it was number 6 on my top 10 list for last year. So, needless to say, it's a show I really like a lot. Without a tremendous amount in the upcoming couple of schedules that interest me, I'm thrilled that it's coming up in January. It kind of sucks that for Westerners, the Netflix situation is going to make that a little more complicated, but I'll take shows that interest me where I can get them. So I'm thrilled it's coming up in January, and it's not an easy show to follow. It's definitely challenging. You mentioned Monsters earlier, which is an incredibly challenging show. I think Beastars, in a different way and perhaps not to the same extent, is also a very challenging show. It pushes you into places you might not prefer to go as a viewer, and makes you think about some difficult things. In fact, I would even go so far as to argue that there are some themes that Beastars talks about that overlap with Monster, believe it or not. Um, as someone who likes to be challenged, who likes to be pushed, I don't like shows that are provocatorial for just for its own sake. And there are examples of those out there. But I like it when they're actually doing it for a purpose and they have some meaningful questions they're trying to ask. And I do think that Beastars falls into that latter category. So I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome, awesome. And one thing I do want to talk about, since you mentioned it,
Sure.
is I do want to discuss Netflix a little bit. Obviously, we can not discover, but discuss Beastars at some other point. But I want to really talk about Netflix for a
Mm.
second here. I want to say Netflix USA really grinds my gears as an anime fan, because the thing that kind of upsets me about it is their whole mantra of let's release it all at once. That works, I think, for the casual consumer, but for your hardcore anime fan that's used to watching things as they air and is used to watching things weekly,
Mm.
I would personally love the choice, because they do that with some of their Korean dramas, and they do that with a lot of their other foreign material. I just don't understand why, and I'm assuming they have like numbers and data that backs up that the majority of viewers probably tend to watch stuff in bulk. But for me personally, as somebody who has a subscription to Crunchyroll, has a subscription to Funimation and High Dive whenever they put something that isn't like some uncensored etchy show, um, I am really miffed at the fact that I am generally watching shows 6 months later than when they aired in Japan.
I think Netflix, there's some reason to suspect that they either don't really know how hardcore anime fandom works or just don't care. And if it's the latter, I would question the business sense of that approach. Um, but on the other hand, Netflix clearly they have their reasons for what they do. They're very savvy. They don't like to disclose their numbers much, so they're very secretive about that. But I do remember like Trigger is a studio that's done a lot of work with Netflix over the years. And Trigger is also a studio that's extremely, by Japanese standards, extremely savvy about Western fandom. They design internationally, and so they always have the international market in mind. And they used to come, and I'm sure they still do, or will when they start again. But they used to come to anime cons where they would have panels for shows that had never aired in the country where the con was taking place, because Netflix was doing, as you say, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, sitting on a show. But they would come to these conventions and do these panels knowing that most of the audience would have seen the show anyway. Um, and how would they do that? Well, we both know how they do that. There are old fashioned ways of watching anime, and serious anime
Right.
fans know how to watch anime that way. And if you're really interested in a show, you're not going to wait 3 months or 6 months to watch it just because Netflix is being a douchebag about it. So, go ahead.
I agree,
Yeah,
but I'm gonna quickly interject, because I really want to talk about this. I end up waiting because
right.
Netflix is funding said show, right? And then not only is Netflix funding it, but the views on the show are what
Yeah.
guarantee or greenlit a second season. So more often than not, I will ask people, especially like my brother is one of the people who he can't wait for certain things, right? I will literally ask him to wait and watch it on Netflix just because I want,
Mm,
something like, say, let's use High Score Girl as an example. I told everybody I knew once that was out to watch it just because I wanted that to get a continuation.
mm,
And I think that's the scary thing is if your hardcore audience has already moved on by the time it's released, you're losing, I think, a huge chunk of the audience that would potentially be the market for that show, right?
It's complicated. It's especially complicated for me because I'm a blogger, and I have to make the decision not only when will I watch a show, but when will I talk about a show. And if I don't talk about Great Pretender until Great Pretender is either on Crunchyroll or Funimation in some weekly format where Westerners are going to see it, by the time I get to talking about Great Pretender, there's a good chance most of the people who could potentially be readers on my blog will have moved on to other things. Um, and so that's a challenge for me, and also it's a challenge for me as a fan because I don't like to wait. High Score Girl, I waited 5 years for that freaking anime adaptation because of the whole nightmare that happened with with the Square Enix and the copyright violations, and so that was an adaptation that was scuttled for several years and then finally revived. But so I'm generally an impatient person to begin with. I don't like to wait, so it's a tough call for me to do what you did. Which the only thing I would say is, one thing you can do if you just can't wait is rewatch it once it's on Netflix and give them the hit counts anyway. So if you're someone who doesn't mind rewatching a show they like, consider it from this perspective. As a Westerner, if you want to support a show you like, it's a lot easier for you. All you have to do is click on it on Netflix and watch it. Japanese people, they pretty much have to spend $100 for 2 episodes on a Blu-ray or a DVD to show they support a show. Now, that's not as big a part of the equation as it used to be, but it's still a major part of the financial equation for shows that aren't Netflix driven. Is disc sales, and so if all you have to do is just rewatch something you've already seen, suck it up and watch it. But I think you're doing it the right way. I'm totally supportive of your approach. I just think we have to be realistic and say for a lot of fans who have a long history of watching anime in a certain way, that's going to be a tough sell to say, I'm not going to watch something until everyone in Japan has already seen it and talked about it. And a lot of my fellow fans have already seen it and talked about it. That's a tough sell for a lot of people. And Netflix is going to have to sooner or later get with the program here, I think, and acknowledge that simply isn't the way the anime cycle works. It's not the same with anime as it is with a lot of other things. You know, Anime is a global phenomenon, and anime fans are used to being more or less in sync with Japanese fans now. And to say, we're going to take that away from you, you just have to wait. I think the fact that Trigger would show up at these conventions expecting people will have already seen the shows is a reflection of the fact that it's just not realistic to expect people to wait. Because for every one person like you who does it the right way, there's probably going to be 5 people who just jump in and watch. Um, so yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know that there's a right answer until Netflix. I don't necessarily see the downside for Netflix. That's what's really frustrating. I don't see the downside for Netflix in acknowledging reality. I don't see how that's going to hurt them. I don't see how that's going to cost them any money. In fact, I think it'll probably make them more money in the long run.
I agree, and I think the holdup here is definitely Netflix because you mentioned anime conventions, and I've been to a few where Trigger and Mappa and all these like very high up people, like I think the CEO of Mappa was one of the people that I heard at a panel, and they've all echoed the sentiment that they themselves are also frustrated by the fact that fans
Right.
aren't getting to see something like they're used to. And I think so. The only one that's I think Netflix isn't the one that's losing in this particular case because they are probably looking at
Sure.
their entire catalog and not just anime. But the anime fans, the anime industry, the
Yep.
producers, those are the people that are getting damaged. So I hope to God whoever is making this decision, because it is just happening for anime, I hope they come to reality, for
I hope
lack of
so.
a a nicer way to say it, because they're doing it with Korean dramas, they're doing it with Chinese dramas, they're doing it with Mexican TV shows. I mean, why is anime being singled out? That's
Yep.
the thing that I'm very curious about. So, uh, definitely something we'll check in on, and I will continue to
Sounds
harp
good.
on as we talk about Netflix anime. Okay, so moving on to the third item on our list. We will talk about something from Japan since we have an actual Japanese resident with us here today, and hopefully for many years to come. So the next article is about the Kyoto International Manga and Anime Fair 2020, which is actually scheduled to be held in September.
It is.
So yeah, so this is also written by Daryl Harding, and it basically reads: the Kyoto International Manga and Anime Fair announced on August 5th that its 2020 event will be going on ahead in September on the 19th and the 20th at the Miyako Messe in Kyoto. Other than Wonder Festival in February, this will be the first big anime event in Japan since the coronavirus pandemic hit the country, which saw Anime Japan and Comiket getting canceled. Um, and then it goes on about like 40 exhibitors are scheduled. The big names like Kadokawa, Aniplex, and many other anime companies are coming to this. And there will be at least 19 works being exhibited over the 2 days. And I believe this is a public event, but advance tickets advance tickets have already gone on sale for the event. So it'll be interesting to see how this event does and if it actually is scheduled. As someone living in Japan, Guardian Enzo, talk to me about how the feeling is on the ground, especially with the second surge, as you mentioned, and whether you would potentially go to this event if you could.
Well, it has normally it actually happens in July, so this in itself amounts to a delay. But I don't know whether I'll go or not, and I'm frankly still suspecting that it will end up being canceled. But if it's not, um, it's going to be very tempting to go because I've gone the last couple of years, and in this part of the country, it's the biggest anime event there is. No longer living in Tokyo, I don't have easy access to Comiket or Jump Festa or TAF, or Anime Japan as they call it now. Those are the big ones, but this is the biggest one in West Japan, and it would be fun. It would be, but my inclination at this point is to say I probably won't because the nature of anime conventions is lots and lots of people packed closely together in indoor spaces. And while this is not Comiket by any stretch of the imagination, which is a cattle call of the highest order, I mean that's that kind of crowding is on another level. But nevertheless, this just strikes me as a bad idea. So if this happens, I may wake up on the Saturday and I may say it's a beautiful day. It's a 600 yen train ride. Uh, I really want to do it. And I can't say I won't go, but if you ask me right now to put the odds on it, I'd say I probably won't. But I reserve the right to change my mind.
Fair enough. Yeah, as one of the people who's like really hunkering down in the coronavirus and being extra careful when I'm in the United States, so everybody here is just not really in reality. There's a lot of people, even in my apartment building, that just won't put on masks and won't be, careful around that stuff. Japan is slightly different, but even there's a second surge. So I'm surprised they're still going with the event. Um, but maybe Japan, I think, is starting to get into that mode of reopening up, and even though there is a risk of infection, and they're going to provide stuff like sanitizers and masks and temperatures taking, it seems like, over there, I still wouldn't feel safe. So I'll be interested to see if this event actually goes on, and if you end up going Guardian Enzo, obviously that'll be huge because there seems like there's going to be some really cool stuff there.
I will have to feel more comfortable with the situation than I do right now. Actually, the daily case numbers, Osaka just set a record the other day, 2 days ago. I think they had more cases than at any point during the pandemic. And Tokyo has been done that several times. So in a sense, the second wave has actually been bigger than the first. And you have your share of COVIDiots here too. People who don't want to wear masks, people who want to go out to bars and host clubs, and so right now there's a Japan has a lot of denial with regards to this whole pandemic, and for whatever reason has not seen the huge surge in serious cases, hospitalizations, and deaths that we've seen in a lot of Western countries. But they're still not testing enough people. They're still, the government is refusing to declare another state of emergency. So I guess it just depends what the numbers do between now and then. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but yeah, I believe me, I love anime cons. I mean, I think they're fun. I really want to go, but if things are motoring along at the way they are right now, I can't see it happening for me. And I frankly, if the daily case numbers we're seeing now are still happening, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I think there's still a good chance this thing would be canceled altogether. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I would say to everybody, stay safe, wear a mask, stay away from me and everybody else. If you
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
stay away. Just leave, please. Not the podcast, but just leave civilization. And we'll leave it at that. So, to happier news for some people, um, we will talk about the Inuyasha spinoff. So this is from Anime News Network, and this actually is written by Rafael Antonio Pineda. Pineda?
Rafael Antonio Pineda.
He has a really cool name. I will say that. Very, very exotic sounding for
Hardly.
me, I guess. Yeah. Right. Wow, you even got the accent right there. So I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm sure there's people who are like, "What are these guys doing? Why are they?" Anyway. Okay, so Inuyasha spinoff. Viz Anime unveiled the first full trailer, a new visual, and the three main cast members for the Yasha Hime Princess Half Demon, Hanayo no Yasha Hime. Hanyo no Yasha Hime. Wow, I butchered that. Anime spin-off of Rumiko Takahashi's Inuyasha series on Thursday. So there's a new trailer out. You can go and watch it. It's on YouTube. Viz has it on their official YouTube channel as well. I've taken a look at it. Obviously, there's some returning characters and there's some children of notable characters as well. I actually did watch the original Inuyasha, but I only watched the anime. I did not read the gigantic manga.
Me too.
So, okay. And for me, I was quite disappointed with the very, very rushed and truncated final season that just skipped a bunch of the manga and then just jumped right into the ending. But Guardian Enzo, I wanted to ask you how you felt about this sequel. Did the trailer do anything for you? Are you excited about this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is where we get into that danger zone where I don't want to be that guy who's negative about everything, and there's a lot in anime that doesn't make me feel super positive at the moment. Honestly, this kind of has dumpster fire vibes for me. It's not the only involvement Rumiko has with it is character design. So anytime you get the original author not being involved in crafting the story, that worries me. We're kind of seeing this evolution of a lot of older franchises that when they get rebooted, it has to now be in the cute girls doing cute things mode. To be honest with you, more than anything else, what it puts me in mind of is Last Exile Fam, which was a sequel that never should have been made.
Oh yeah, I never finished it, and I loved the original Last Exile.
Yeah, me too. I mean, Last Exile was it was a formative series for me, and in a sense, Inuyasha was too. I mean, I didn't read the manga. I read bits and pieces of it later when I wanted to find out all that was being skipped, as you skillfully noted in your introduction. But I loved the anime, and I didn't love all of it, but it was still important to me. I really bonded with the characters. Um, I I feel like if this was a story that needed to be told, Rumiko would have told it herself. The animation in the trailer looks fine. I mean, it doesn't it doesn't look wonky or anything. It just I'm going into this sort of with the attitude of, unfortunately, maybe not fair on my part, of it's going to need to do something to prove to me why it needs to exist in the first place. Um, and the premise sounds kind of, let's jury rig a sequel to a classic and give it 2020 anime tropes. um and you know I you know there are issues with the way the Inuyasha original ended in anime form, because, as you say, it skipped a lot of pieces to get where it needed to be. But the answer to that is not a sequel. The answer would have been something like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where you retell the story and give the original the treatment it deserves. Um, so I will certainly be watching. As an Inuyasha fan, I have to do that, and I'll certainly be thrilled if it surprises me. But my expectations are modest. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I am actually even harsher on this than you are, and which is funny because I picked it. But I really liked Inuyasha, the original 167 episode series. I liked that quite a bit, even with its recycled animation. But it was long anime series are generally pretty good if they get to like over 100 episodes. There's generally something there. But yeah, the way the original series ended and the way it's just like three girls basically that are daughters of the original the original core cast's like three main characters. It just seems like it's in a completely different genre from the original. And so yeah, I don't know if I'll even be watching it unless you specifically come to me, you Guardian Enzo, you specifically come to me and say you need to watch this. I will not. So
Well, yeah, I mean, my first impressions post will definitely be out there, so I'll definitely be watching the first couple of episodes, unless I just hate the first ep so much that it's just like I. There is an emotional side of it too, where if you love an original so much, if something comes along that you really feel is defacing it, you might even bail quicker just because you hate to see something you love being defiled in that way. I hope it doesn't come to
yeah,
that.
I mean, you've got Guardian in your title, so I'm going to hold you to that.
Yes.
Guard me from all
Okay.
the terrible things in this
All
world.
right. All right. Check in with me, and I'll let you know whether to proceed.
Yes, sir. That sounds perfect. So,
Okay.
we're getting near the end. I swear, these
Okay.
sections will not be as big as they are this week. This is the first week where we're doing a new section, and I found like 8 or 9 items worth talking about from the past week. I assure you all, this is not going to happen very often. But moving on to another sad thing,
Mm.
I think, because I like one of the series uh, that this studio has done. This is a oh wow, okay, it's Rafael Antonio Pineda again, and he talks about Arms Studio Arms. The article is
Mm.
Ikitosen Alphenlied Studio Arms declares bankruptcy. And I think it's Alphenlied or Alphenlied. There's been a huge debate on that in the old days, and I just call it Elfenlied because I read it that way. But
Yep.
basically, Studio Arms, which was founded in 1996 and initially was an outsourcing studio for Studio Parrot Pero. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also did some adult anime. That studio has basically declared bankruptcy, and they were best known for doing Elfen Lied. They did Queen's Blade and Ikitosen and Samurai Girls. While a lot of these are actually not very good, except for Elfen Lied. Oh, they did Mayo, which was the one about the Mao and the hero where they end up
Mm.
in a romantic relationship, uh, which I remember both of us, I think, watched and enjoyed. I think, but anyway.
Yeah, I remember that
Oh, and
one.
they also
Yeah.
did. I can never pronounce the name Brynhilder in the Darkness. The other,
Yeah, Goku Koku no
yeah,
Brynhilder. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
the other one from the Elfen Lied author.
Yes.
So
A much misunderstood series in my opinion, but that's another
yeah,
topic.
yeah, I actually like that one a decent bit.
I liked it too. I did too. It was in my opinion it was a comedy series masquerading as a horror series, or maybe it was a horror series masquerading as a comedy series. I'm not sure which, but it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, so I guess the company has filed for special liquidation or filed for it on July 22nd, and uh, after going through like a shareholder meeting on May 31st. So yeah, they're kind of done, I guess, which is sad to see.
Yeah, they're done. Yeah. Not the first, not the last.
Yeah, I wonder if it was because the article doesn't say what the reasoning behind it was. Was it just that they weren't finding work, or was it COVID, or was it just I don't know.
I think COVID is costing a lot of is COVID is basically going to be the sorting hat for a lot of these troubled companies. It's because if they were if companies were healthy when this all started, they'll have a little ability to survive it. But if you were already in trouble, I think for a lot of companies this could be the thing that pushes them over the edge, and that applies to anime production as well. Arms was not a huge player. It wasn't one of the top tier studios. It was a second tier studio. It has some history, as you said. The Queen's Blade series, I would have assumed was quite financially successful for them. But as we know, in the production committee model, the production studio itself generally does not see a lot of the profit. They're quite low on the totem pole. So I think a lot of the money that Queensblade made did not end up filtering down to Arms. But here's my take on it, and I'm always sad to see a production studio go under. But if the only way the industry can survive or a studio can survive is by slave labor on the part of its younger animation team, in betweeners and such, maybe more studios need to go under, because this is not a sustainable production model. Um, so I do think there, unfortunately, it's two things. There's no buffer zone for production studios. They have no safety net, and two, they don't stand to make enough money off successful anime productions, because that's going to light novel publishers and seiyuu agencies and idol agencies, and all the companies that rank above them in the production committee model skim off most of the profits before they ever make it to the production studios. And with Netflix, which pays more, that money is going to defray studio debt. So more of it is making to the studios, but almost none of it is making it to the employees. It's going to defray corporate debt rather than actually going to the animators who are making $300 a month to work 70-hour weeks. So I'm sad to see Arms go. It's not a studio that I feel a strong personal connection with necessarily, but I'm always sad to see a production studio go. And I did like, as you said, Goku Koku no Brynhilder. I thought that was a fun and interesting, quirky show, and Elfen Lied, or Lead. But it's not the first. I felt more when Manglobe went under, for example, because
Yes.
they were responsible for some shows I really loved, and it's not going to be the last one. We were already probably going to see a couple of anime studios that weren't going to survive even before the pandemic hit, and now we may lose even a couple above and beyond that. It's sad. And you have another story we're going to be talking about soon. Spoilers, but another story we're going to be talking about, which I think ties into this same topic as well. So it's just the reality of the industry now.
Actually, since you mentioned it, let's go to that story. I
Yeah.
So Asahi Broadcasting Group, a holding, actually acquires
Mm,
Silverlink as a subsidiary. This is also by
right.
Rafael Antonio Pineda. I I think
Mm.
he's like their
Raphael, you're busy.
he's their star reporter over there at Anime News
Mm,
Network. But
mm,
yeah, kind of like how we mentioned, they purchased Silverlink, Asahi Broadcasting Group Holdings, as a
mm.
subsidiary company as of Monday. And Silverlink itself actually reabsorbed its its own subsidiary, Anime Studio Connect, last month. So there's a lot of movement going on in there. And for Silverlink, they have um, in December 2007 was when they were established, and they were actually they spun off of Frontline Company. Some of the notable things that this studio has made is the Fate, the Prisma Ilia series, those like spin-offs for the Fate franchise, Strike the Blood, Death March to Death March to a Parallel World, which is an isekai, Kokoro Connect, Watamote, which I think you liked a lot. Um,
I did.
My Next Life as a Villainess, which I have seen, and the currently airing and exceedingly hilarious Misfit of Demon Academy, which they're kind of running right now. So, um, Silverlink is kind of a B tier studio, but they do solid work. So it seems like they're
Yeah, high B, I would say.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're actually doing well, it seems like they just got bought out by a bigger company. What's your take on
Yeah,
this?
yeah, this is like, this is to some extent like when Madhouse was effectively bought out by NTV. When you have a TV network buying an animation studio, Madhouse is a bigger studio than Silverlink, but Silverlink is by no means a pygmy. They've done some significant work. My favorite series among them was Watamote. That's, I think, their best work, but I view them as basically as a sort of a spin-off studio of Shaft, in that they have you know, their big director was a Shaft veteran, and a lot of their stylistically, they were a spin-off of Shaft in the same way that Bones was a spin-off of Sunrise. They had a lot of Sunrise people go to Bones when they started, and stylistically they were sort of a twist on the Sunrise model. And I think that's been true with Silverlink and Shaft to an extent. I'm not a big Shaft fan, but I do like a lot of what Silverlink has done. I just think Silverlink also did another series which I absolutely love, Tanaka-kun wa Itsumo Kararuge. Tanaka-kun is always listless, which I think is arguably
Yes, that is amazing. Why do they not have that in this list?
the most beautiful anime beautiful in terms of visuals, one of the most beautiful anime comedies ever made. And a fantastic manga, by the way, just a wonderful manga. So this is not a bad thing for Silverlink, in much the same way Madhouse getting bought out by NTV was not a bad thing for them. I think the studio will still exist as an imprint, and I think it's just that now a lot of what they see is it's going to be financially, it's going to be directly linked between Asai and the studio. So you're not going to see Silverlink producing series for NTV or something like that very often, or MBS. The main studio, the main TV networks behind them is obviously going to be their owner. Um, but it gives them financial stability. Asai has a tremendous amounts of capital. um, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just as the industry contracts, as it becomes harder and harder for studios with their low ranking and production committee, hierarchies, it becomes harder and harder for them to financially be stable. The opportunity to get majority shares bought out by a larger umbrella company that has a lot of cash, it you can see the appeal. It's not hard to see. So if it keeps Silverlink functioning as a studio, if it I think Madhouse's glory days probably are a few years in the past, but I don't think that's a result necessarily of NTV buying them. And I don't think Silverlink. I don't think this is a bad thing for them. I think they can continue to operate on more or less the same capacity that they have. I just said, maybe they lose a little bit of their creative independence, which is not a good thing. But I think Madhouse has still continued to do some excellent work after they were majority bought out. So I don't see any reason to think Silverlink can't do the same.
Yes, I agree. And one thing that I have heard, and if you have some insight into this, I'd love some confirmation. But I've heard that the way Japanese business works is they're very, very risk averse. They really kind of calculate before they do something, and they're not on big on taking risks. So the fact that Asahi Broadcast Group Holdings is making this kind of move in this climate, I think speaks to some kind of confidence in Silverlink, like a huge amount of confidence.
Well, I think it does. I think to some extent it also reflects the fact that an animation studio, unless you're talking about something really, really huge like the IG portal or something like that, but somebody like Silverlink, for a company like Asahi, which is also affiliated with the Asahi Beverage Company, and so this is a big, big conglomerate. The amount of cash that's required for them to buy Silverlink is probably like somebody do a runabout and check the couch cushions kind of money.
Oh wow.
Um, so for them, it's not that big a deal. That you also have to realize too that, as you said, the business model in Japan is pretty conservative. There's some even in this time, I've seen stories that something like 500 trillion yen in cash is being hoarded by major Japanese corporations right now, which is a tremendous amount of money.
Yes.
We're talking like, 100, 1 trillion is what? A trillion is 1,000 billion,
Yeah.
right? So you're talking about tremendous amounts of money being hoarded. So companies like Asahi, they're not cash poor. They have plenty of money to buy a little minnow like Silverlink if they want. And they see this in much the same way. I think for them, they see there's money to be made in anime, and this gives them sort of a way to be inside, to give them an in-house production studio. I frankly would not be surprised to see Netflix at some point try to cut out the middleman. And it's complicated because Netflix is a foreign company, but to see Netflix get into an ownership position of an anime studio, well, even if it's one they have to build themselves, uh, that wouldn't shock me to see that happen in the future, because it's not a lot of money to them. It's really pocket change to them. So if they can improve their business model by doing something like this, absolutely, I could see why they would do it. And with the stories you hear about working conditions in anime, I'm not sure it's a bad thing. Anything that gets more money into the industry, the trick is it has to trickle down to the people who are actually making the product. And right now, that's not happening. But if this happens enough, let me just I'll wrap this up by saying this: whatever is happening now is not really working, because if animators are making $300 a month, it's not working.
Right.
So if something shakes that up, I'm prepared to give it a look see and see if it can change. So I say, hell yes, let's do it. Let's bring companies like Asahi in. Let's have Netflix get more and more directly involved. Maybe eventually that will make a difference in the actual lives of the creators, which I think is something we would all love to see.
Yes, for sure. Sure. And speaking of Netflix, that'll kind of take us to our final story of the week, uh, which is another Netflix series coming out. One that was actually delayed. So this is about Seven Deadly Sins, Nanatsu no Taizai, and this is written by Alex Mateo. So another author. Anime News Network is not solely run by Raphael. Basically, this article talks about how the official website for the Seven Deadly Sins anime mentioned on Wednesday that the next season of Nanatsu no Taizai, Dragon's Judgment, Fudo no Shimpan, is going to be delayed to January 2021. It was originally supposed to air in October, it seems like. So yeah, delayed in Japan from from when it was supposed to come out this year to next year. Um, and the interesting thing here is that Seven Deadly Sins, the current season or the last season, just came out, I think, this week in U.S. shores. So we just got it, and Japan is now thinking about the next season. So that tells you a few things. But I talking about season 2, or Netflix calls it season 3 because those 4 OVAs are technically season 2. But season 3, I was not super impressed with because that was the first season where they took some huge logical leaps and apparently cut out a huge part of the manga and rushed a bunch of things. So I did not like the last 3 or 4 episodes of the last season I saw. And so I'm really struggling to get back into Seven Deadly Sins. But what's your take on it? You've also seen the series, correct?
I watched most of the first season and I kind of lost interest at that point. So I can't weigh in terms of the content side of it because I haven't really followed it for since maybe the 10th or 11th episode, which I think is about as far as I got into it. As far as the production delay, one season production delays at this point, that's almost a standard, I think. And I think what you ended up seeing is, a lot of the series that were originally going to air in summer got pushed back to fall. So as a result, shows that was originally supposed to be produced for fall, like this one, ended up getting pushed back to winter. And I think, you'll see this domino effect continue a little bit into 2021, assuming that there isn't another huge flare up, which causes a major production slowdown again. But I think what you're seeing right now is the aftermath of the first one, with just a domino effect of the delays from this series from this year starting to push stuff over into next year. So, it's all part of the deal. It's all part of the deal. All the studios are adapting in their own ways, and I wasn't Yahare and Ray Zero were both delayed originally too, right? Weren't they both supposed to air in spring or summer?
Yes, they were supposed to come in spring, and they got pushed forward.
Yeah, which is why you're seeing Nanatsu get pushed over, and not only Nanatsu get pushed over to 2021 because those man hours are now being used up by stuff that was originally supposed to be finished airing by now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I will say something about Netflix though, because I've been bashing them quite a bit. They do commit to their franchises. Like already getting a 4th season after like I think a 5th season. I guess it's technically season 5 because the 4th just came out. So that one just came out in the U.S. and they're already scheduling the next one. So at the very least, fans of the franchise, and I don't know if I am anymore. I'll let you guys know, but fans of the franchise are at least lucky to have an anime continue at a regular pace and be funded and all that stuff. So
Yeah, any franchise I was a fan of, I would not be complaining if Netflix were involved in the production. That's fine with me, because it's going to get funded adequately, and Netflix is not allergic to pushing sequels. So, there are definitely issues with Netflix, but if you're a fan of a franchise, if you see that Netflix is involved in it, some people view that as a reason to be disappointed. In more ways than that, I think it's a reason to be happy.
yes, for sure. And I guess we'll leave even Netflix on a positive note. Um,
Yeah, well, hey, there are positives to it for
yes,
sure.
for sure. So that about wraps up the news segment. We'll transition into the next segment now. This one ran really long. I was not expecting to hit a whole hour, but this was a
Okay.
huge news week. Surprisingly, the
Mm.
first week we're back, and Raphael, Alex, and a name that I couldn't pronounce at all. But I want to give him credit, so I'm going to go look up one of his articles.
Okay.
And Daryl Harding. The three of them were busy this week and definitely got us a lot of interesting news. So we'll do this segment, I think, every week. We'll recap the news from the previous week because we record on Fridays, and we'll try and keep it as topical as we can. And I suspect that these will not be an hour like they were this time.
I suspect you're right.
Okay. And with that, let's transition to our next and probably our biggest segment of the podcast, which is
Topic of the week.
so this section, dear listeners, is going to be what we will call topic of the week. And we've done these before, if you remember the previous incarnation of our podcast. But basically, this week we will highlight something that we want to talk about and have a deeper discussion on. This week, because the news was insanely big as a section, we're going to kind of go a little bit smaller, but you can expect these sections to be kind of the meat of the episode. If the first two sections are the appetizer, then this is kind of the big thing. So jumping into it, the topic I want to talk about this week, Guardian Enzo, is actually COVID-19, which we've talked about quite a bit in this episode, but I want to kind of get into some more specifics and kind of wrap up our overall thoughts about how that's affected us, the anime industry, and our viewing of it. And I'll actually start off with a question about what we lost because of COVID, besides obviously the life and the loved ones, and our hearts go out to all the people that have suffered intense loss in this time. But from an anime perspective, we also lost a couple of series, and I want to kind of mention some stuff that we are sad that either got delayed or got pushed, and then what we think will happen to it. So I'll kick it over to you, Guardian Enzo. What is something that you saw delayed or lost that you're kind of upset about, and you'd want to talk more about?
Well, at this point, most of the stuff that I was interested in at the time this hit as uh, either like a couple of shows, like I said, like Yesterday and Nami Okite Kure, those managed to air, and a couple of other things have gone away and come back, like Major, which has had two hiatuses but is now back, hopefully to stay. The one great outlier here is Kingdom,
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned it.
from Studio Pierrot, which is a notoriously bottom line oriented anime production company. So probably did not have a lot of meat on the bones of that production. But we don't know what's going on with Kingdom. There has been, as far as I know, and I've been checking, no official mention of what's going to happen with the show. No announcement of a resume date, but also no announcement of cancellation. The manga remains, in extremely popular. I would assume that this is a show that they want to resume and complete at some point. But when that will happen, I have no idea. As I said, Studio Pierrot is notoriously cheap, as anyone who watched the first two seasons of Kingdom will certainly attest to. Um, so it's just possible that that production was so threadbare and so bare bones that they had no safety net at all. They were literally giving stuff to the courier the day before it was supposed to air on TV in the Shirobako style. So it may just be that it's taking them a long time to catch up. That's in anime terms, that's the show that I'm most concerned with, because there's just been no bo peeps about what's happening with it. And I did fear when this started that some shows would get canceled altogether just because it wasn't financially worthwhile for the production committees to go back and finish them. I didn't necessarily think Kingdom would be one of those, but the fact that we've heard nothing about it makes me suspect that that's at least something one could realistically be nervous about.
Yes, so I'm glad you mentioned Kingdom. I actually have been following it very, very closely. My wife and I we watched. So I got her into Kingdom, and we watched through the entire first season and then the second season, and we caught up to season three. And for anybody that's like involved with watching season three, it starts on a really high note.
Yeah.
And it's super exciting. And obviously, COVID happened. The one thing I did want to note, Guardian Enzo, because I looked this up, um, the studio actually changed for season three. It's not Perot anymore. It's Signpost.
But Signpost is a subsidiary. It's like an offshoot studio of Pierrot, as far as I know.
Okay, that
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. But the reason I brought that up is because season three definitely felt like it was way higher budget than the previous seasons in terms of like the animation style, uh, the artwork, just everything. Because if you remember, one of the reasons that the original Kingdom struggled a bit, at least when it was airing, was because of the heavy, heavy use of CG and the fact that I think they eventually went away from it in season two, but season one there was a lot of very cheap CGI, and that
Yeah.
turned off a lot of people from the
Yeah,
show.
Kingdom is a show that has always thrived strictly based on the writing, and because the animation has always been, you know, grisly. It was never quite as bad as it was in the first season when it was relying heavily on really, really, really just awful CGI. But and I agree with you, it did perk up a little bit in season three. It's definitely looked better, which had me feeling quite optimistic. As you said, it did change officially to Signpost, which is Signpost is like they have a long history with Pierrot. They've had a couple different names over the years. They were called Pierrot Plus most recently. Then they were Studio Kikon before that. So, but they're still owned by the parent company of Studio Pierrot. So it's the same animation family. Maybe this particular subdivision is a little bit higher quality. Based on the evidence of what you'd see with Kingdom, I think you'd have to say that was probably the case. But my overriding assumption is still that it's Pierrot's financial model, which is very, very, very aggressive in terms of getting stuff done cheaply, and that may be a contributing factor to why we haven't heard anything about a resumption. Um, but I don't know. I mean, who the hell knows? No one's talking.
Yeah, the last thing we actually heard was from the official Twitter account, and I think all the production committee said is that they would have an announcement for fans eventually once they decide what to do with the situation. So they're not sure, which is very, very interesting. The reason I'm a little hopeful is because of the higher production value and
Yeah,
how interesting this story was. And it seems like this was only going to be one core. It wasn't going to be a long series. At least from the budget, it definitely seemed like this was going to be one 13 episode like focused story. The pacing was also really fast. So I'm wondering if at the very least, they're probably deciding between do we re-air it on TV or do we just release it straight to disc and have like it become an OVA release and have the fans that want it supported that way.
and it's also worth noting that the time slot that this show airs in is being filled by the final season of Attack on Titan, starting with fall.
Right.
So that presents another. That's another issue with these production delays. Uh, the time slot issue is important for stuff that airs on television, right? So, uh, in theory, Kingdom, the first two seasons, I think were both three cores. I was assuming this one was probably going to be at least two, probably three. That can't happen with AOT airing in that time slot starting in October, assuming that doesn't get delayed. And I've heard nothing about that being delayed. So that's another complicating factor. As you say, maybe something goes straight to video, or I mean, who knows? But my hope at this point, my realistic hope is maybe we're going to get the first core finished this season, and which is like 8 or 9 more episodes, and if they hurry they could still make it, and then maybe take a break while Shingeki airs in the fall, and then maybe Kingdom could come back and finish airing next year. But all I'm doing is speculating, and the reason that I'm speculating and the reason you're speculating is because the officially we're getting no information. So if you don't give people information, they'll speculate.
Very true. But I'm also not very surprised because Japanese companies are terrible at communication. And that's not limited to just the anime industry. It's just video games, what have you. They will just, when they're ready to say something, they will say it.
Yeah,
And or they will hold an event and you'll
yeah,
find out that way.
yeah.
But whenever these off kilter things happen, you're left in the dark for a good amount of time. I will say I am hopeful because of how strong this season was, how much money they invested in it. I just think they're figuring out how to best like monetize it and position it, which is fair, you know.
It's fair. It's fair. It's just that with virtually every other show, at least all the ones that I was following, there's either been a resolution or continuation or at least communication. And this is the only one in my catalog where we've gotten jack squat. So it's frustrating.
Yeah,
It's frustrating.
yeah, I've noticed it, and yeah, I don't want to think about that for sure. It does scare me and keep
Yeah.
me up at night.
But I think the time slot issue is I suspect that that's a major factor. And if I was betting money at this point, and it's strictly a guess, but if I was betting money, I would say probably airing 2021 would be my guess.
Okay,
Um,
I'll take a separate bet, and I'll say that it'll be released direct to DVD
okay,
or Blu-ray,
we'll see.
and yeah, we'll see. Yep, for sure. Okay, so Kingdom was definitely, the thing on both of our minds. I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. But beyond, and we talked about a lot of the anime industry delays and stuff like that. Um, what do you think, I guess, so whenever something like this happens, humans are kind of forced to adapt and to change and, maybe find other things, get a hobby. But, I'm not definitely like that. I refuse to let go of my anime. And so, um, what did you kind of do, and what would you suggest to the listeners? And I'll give my own take on this after you, of doing while there's an anime drought of sorts. And I know it's coming back a little bit now, but even this season is like really small compared to some of the other ones we've seen. So, how have you been coping with the drought, and what are some suggestions or tips, if you have any, for how other anime fans can do that?
Well, we've already talked about back catalog, watching old stuff, rewatching old stuff that we really like. Reconnecting with a series you love after a long absence is certainly a way to keep yourself connected to the medium. Finding series that are on the bucket list that you've been wanting to watch for a long time, well, there's probably no better opportunity than now. So that's another suggestion. And then lastly, I would say the manga industry is, in my opinion, infinitely creatively more healthy than anime right now. Anyway, COVID aside, manga's literally, I don't have time to read all the really good manga that I would like to read. So read more manga. There's lots of great manga out there. Manga is creatively far more diverse than anime. It always has been, but the gap is even greater now than it ever has been before. And eventually, if we're lucky, some of these great manga will eventually become anime. So maybe the ones you choose to read now, we'll even get the opportunity to see them adapted someday. So that would be the third suggestion for me: read more manga.
Right. So you mentioned a couple of things, and I want to get into one of them in specific first. Guardian Enzo,
Hmm.
tell me, have you actually gone through any of your back catalog and watched anything that you missed on?
Uh, I've tried a few things. Like I went and watched what was the show about oh god, I'm gonna forget the name now. It's about the little girl who time jumps or and ends up in a medieval time and ends up working like going to work for the church or something like that. You know that one. Um, like she's sickly and she's always falling down and getting sick, and she ends up being friends with this kid who wants to become a merchant, and it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Arte or something like
Yeah,
that.
no, not Arte, but it's just stuff that's like really popular. that and then as you said the what was the one what's the one about the romance, the one who keeps triggering her death flags.
Oh yeah, the villainous one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so stuff that's like really popular that I that's what I've kind of tried to do actually is not so much going into the old shows that were on the bucket list, because by this point honestly I've watched most of the stuff from years ago that I really wanted to see. There's still some other stuff out there that if I wasn't so lazy, I could remember it and go look. But I've tried more recent stuff that's been really popular to try to jump into those shows and see if Ascendance of a Bookworm. That's it, Ascendance of a Bookworm. Um,
Ah,
so,
that one. I know.
but stuff that's really popular that I didn't quite get, and maybe I was missing something. And in most cases, it's turned out I've not. It's just not for me. But I've tried to give those shows a chance, and like the Sentence of a Bookworm has some charm to it, and I got it 3 or 4 episodes worth of entertainment out of it, and the same with the Villainous. I could see why people like it. It's amusing, and it is for its genre. It's quite good. But I kind of got to the point where it's like, okay, I've gotten as much out of this as it's doing for me, and it's time to move on. That's really what it's been for me is less old shows and more newer shows that were super popular that I missed out on. And I'm like, okay, let's make sure I'm not missing out on something that I loved. So those have been what I've gone to. What about yourself?
So, dear listeners, this is why Guardian Enzo is a much better human being than I am. Because I did not. I have a backlog. I have a list. I should probably watch it. My brother and some of the people that I am very close to have told me and begged me to watch series. And instead of doing that, what I do is I force my preferences on them and get them to watch stuff with me that
Wow.
I have watched and loved before. So I have not been very great about that. In short, there's some stuff like I think, what was the reverse harem show that was only one core that you and a bunch of people loved? It was like this shojo manga. It aired around the same time that Snow White with the red hair, Akagami no
Hmm.
Shirayuki, when that aired.
Hmm.
A similar kind of art style as well. It's a show that's never probably going to get a season 2, which is why I refuse to watch it. I don't want to be heartbroken again. That's
Okay.
happened way too much with me. But yeah, there are a few big series that uh, I have been told to watch, and I just can't go back, man. I can't go back to an unknown quantity. The way I look at it is, I probably passed on it for a reason, because like you, we're both fairly old gentlemen, and we've watched anime for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a feeling that I between the two of us, we've seen most of the original stuff. Obviously, there's still stuff I discover every now and then. Sometimes to your credit, like Major, I had missed out on Major, and I ended up jumping into that primarily based on your recommendations on your blog, actually.
Hmm.
So um, that turned out to be really good, and I also tried Touch when the new sequel for that came out. But I have not looked back at the catalog that I missed out on. It's generally either series that I really like and stuff like that. And to that point, I was not. So when I asked you the question, I was not expecting you to actually sincerely answer with, "Oh yeah, I tried some stuff, and
Well,
some of it was good."
yeah, it wasn't that good. It was
Okay.
tolerable. It was tolerable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as I grow older and have less and less time, the B tiers and the C tier shows that I would tolerate, like your Ikitosens. I don't know why I look at myself, and I don't know why I even watched a season or two of that. Like, it horrifies me. Or like even something like Sword Art Online, which I was watching for a while because it was kind of at the place where it was so bad it was good.
Mm.
But that kind of stuff just like falls to the wayside for me now. Um, I need my like really really good shows or something that's like uniquely suited to me, like your Sakura So the Beautiful Bones
Mm.
show or whatever, or something like that. But yeah, I'm finding I'm a lot more pickier right now. So for me, I definitely did not do what you did and gave some things a fair shake, and maybe I should. Uh, People are welcome to either write in, we'll talk about that later,
Sure.
or comment and let us know if there's something that I horribly missed from the last few seasons. I do know I tried Misfit of the Demon Kingdom or whatever, the show that's currently airing right now, and that is so hilariously bad. It's so good. Like
Okay.
they're in on the joke of what they're doing.
Okay.
It's so over the top. It's so like how Gurren Lagann at certain points gets really over the top.
Yes, I certainly do.
Yeah, so that all the time and constantly like exceeding itself in a very jokey way. That's that show. It's an isekai show and it's very generic and it has all those generic trappings, but then it just does this over the top, overpowered main character that is. It's kind of like what was that show? The Eins Ul Gon show, Overlord. It
Mm.
was like Overlord, but you know how Overlord takes itself very seriously.
Okay.
Well, I think it takes itself seriously. I don't
Yeah,
think
I didn't
the
watch more than 4 or 5 episodes, so I couldn't say for sure, but I think I sort of get where you're coming from. Yeah.
yeah, it was very self-absorbed in what it thought of itself. This show is in on the joke, so that I think I wouldn't have tried if I wasn't like starved for anime,
Yeah.
and I'm glad I did
Well,
because
good.
it's really funny.
Okay. And
That's
and
yeah.
I have to be fair, I have found stuff this way before. I mean, stuff that I've actually gone on to really like where people have said uh, you know, um, um, you know, like Girlish Number is a good example. You remember Girlish Number? It was about the girl who wants to be a voice actress, and her brother used to be
Yes.
a voice actor, and now he's a manager.
Right,
And that
right.
was based on a light novel, which sort of was a strike against it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a show I would not normally have given the time of day to, but a couple people recommended it, and I said, "All right, I'll give it a shot." And I ended up really quite liking that show. So there has been stuff. I mean, I didn't love it, but I ended up, certainly happy to finish it and quite
Enjoying it.
enjoying it. It was, I think, in somewhere in like my 15 to 20 range the year it came out. So I have found stuff this way. Not usually, as you said, when I find that my instincts are more often right than wrong, and if I sense a show is not for me, there was probably a good reason why I sensed it. But once in a while, it does happen, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's like hitting a good shot on the 18th hole when you're a bad golfer. It's like, you know what, boy, if I could just hit it like that every time, it gets you out on the golf course again. And that's kind of how it is with shows like that, where you keep going back to the well and thinking, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not seeing something. Maybe I need to give more of these a try. And usually you're right. But then there's that one time where it surprises you and you say, well, geez, maybe I need to do this a little more often. Maybe I'm missing more than I realize I'm missing. So it's always nice to be surprised, isn't it?
Yes, and I think the opportune thing you said there was for me. I have after watching it for so many years as you have anime. I mean, um, I have a very good idea of what I like and what I don't like, and while that does change from time to time, my tolerance level for a lot of things that I think I tolerated in the past, like I tolerated harem shows a lot more, or harem shows, however you want to say it. Um, uh, I can't stand them anymore. Like if I watched Love Hina today, even as awesome as it was at the time, I don't think I would be able to stomach it anymore, given the deluge of stuff we've gotten in that genre.
Yeah,
So
no, I totally get that. Sometimes something is tolerable when it originally came out and it's had so many bad imitators that even if you go back to the original now, it feels like one of the imitators because the theme itself has become so omnipresent. And yeah, I'm burned out. Like anything really with tsunderes, that or tsunderes, I'm pretty much burned out. I can't watch any show that goes, even Toradora, which I know people love. And I kind of tolerated it the first time because there were certain characters in that show I really did like, although not the heroine. But there were characters in that show I really liked. But I don't think I could even watch Toradora now. I don't think I could get through it because she
Oh, I
would
definitely couldn't.
she would grate on me to the point where I would be like, nope, I'm done, I'm out.
And I'm kind of glad that Kagumi Arei, or
Yeah, that's
however you,
her. Kugami, yeah.
yeah, I'm glad she's gone away from the tsundere typecasting that she was being pigeonholed in, because she did Louise, Toradora's main
Yeah, she
character,
does a
a
lot
bunch.
less of it now. She still does them occasionally, but
Yes,
not
but
nearly
it,
as often.
which I'm glad for, because for a while we got like 5 series a year
Yes.
with her doing that one voice,
Yes.
and it was she's a very talented voice actress. Like, she plays Alphonse from Full Metal
Yeah,
Alchemist,
no.
which is like,
She's good in male roles. Actually, she does quite well with those. She's done some of those very successfully. But she doesn't get,
and the little. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, she doesn't get asked to stretch very often. That's the problem.
Yeah, and I think she does fine with the little girl roles too. The
Some
like
of them,
the shy little girl roles that she's been doing recently. I think those work, but when she tries to that voice, I think they just. I think it's not so much a her problem as it is just anime voice actor or anime voice directors like typecasting her that way, because that happens fairly often.
sure.
Um, uh, but yeah, it's nice to not see that anymore. But I agree with you. Toradora, I don't think I would be able to watch it right now. But I will say, I can still tolerate the tsundere if it's either done tastefully, as in it's not overt and the focus of the show, or if it's a parody of itself, which is primarily what shows do these days. They just parody the tsundere trope, which I think we're also getting to a point where that might be hitting critical mass.
Yeah, to me, that can really only that can work. But it has to be done skillfully, okay. And because it self parody only works if the show doing the parody is has the chops to pull it off. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. um and I think there are some. I almost think you couldn't. I feel like we should be at that point where with isekai shows now, where the only way they ever get made is if they're self parodies. Because
Oh, they're all parodies these
you
days.
really think so?
Most of the ones I watch are, I guess.
I guess, yeah. It still feels to me like there's way too many that are playing it straight, and which to me is almost defies belief. But I,
Oh yeah, there's one every season that's just the generic, straight faced. I think there was a video by Giguk. I think he's a YouTuber, good YouTuber, funny guy on YouTube, and he did one where he literally took all the main characters from these generic isekai shows and put them next to each other, and you could literally like overlap them on top of each other, and they'd be the same character.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. That's a problem. I mean, but that's the thing. You remember when Durarara's sequel came out? The Durarara season 2, like 7 or 8 years after the first one aired.
And broke my heart.
And as we talked about Bakano, I like Bakano much better than Durarara, but I quite like the first season of Durarara when I
I
watched it
loved
years
the
ago.
first season.
But when the sequel came out, I was like, it totally didn't work for me. And I think part of that was so many light novel adaptations since that have imitated Durarara in format and genre, but not as well, that my tolerance for that style had basically gone away. And Durarara felt derivative and it felt tired, even though it was the one that pioneered a lot of these tropes in the first place.
So I agree with you on the fact that Durara season 2 and 3 and 4, because they every core was a season. Um, those were really bad, but I don't think it was because of the tropes of the storytelling. Because Durara, with its like almost, I don't know if you've seen that movie Crash, which was in I think 2015.
Oh, yes. I remember. Best Picture winner.
Yeah, Durara was the anime version of that, as far as I remember it. In that, it would switch to a different character from a different perspective every episode, and then it would keep going back and forth from all these viewpoints. I don't think that is an overused concept with a huge cast of characters, but I do agree the story. So I covered and blogged all of Durarara because I blogged the first series and I was very attached to the franchise, and it slowly killed the franchise for me. As I went through and I wrote about it every week, it just became a therapy session for me to just talk about how bad it was. And to your point, I actually went back and watched a couple of episodes while I was reviewing it to see, okay, am I going crazy or is this just really bad? And it turned out that the first season was a lot better because um, it would each episode would focus on one specific thing. There was always forward momentum in the plot. Characters would change and grow, and these are things that just don't happen in the sequel. And I think it's less so. It's more of a case of the first season was really good, and I really started to understand that you should be very careful what you wish for, because sometimes you may get this thing that you've been really wanting, which was I wanted a continuation to Durara for a long time, and you might find out that the continuation itself might just ruin the thing for you, and that's what it did. I finished the series, and I do not ever want to watch another Durara thing. I know the light novel got a sequel, but I hope to God they don't make an anime of it, and even if they do, I would not probably watch it.
Fair enough.
And this coming from the guy who told everybody and their dog and their cat and their grandma to watch Durarara season 1. And now I don't even do that. I'm like, I don't want people to go through that journey of disappointment.
The journey of disappointment. I feel like when I write my history of 2020, that might be the name for the book. That journey of disappointment.
Oh, to 2020, I don't even. Yeah, let's just hope it just ends on a less dire note than it started.
Talk to me in November.
Yeah, I hear you. Oh, dude, I'm in the country where I'm. Yeah. We'll try to keep the politics.
We'll keep that out of the conversation. Absolutely.
Because we could go on for hours about that stuff, and everybody has their opinion. And with regards to opinions, even though we'll be giving a lot of them, it's the same as like anything that is unsavory. Everybody has a butt, but you shouldn't air it out in public, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so I think that's a good a spot as any to kind of end the conversation on COVID on. We ended it on butts. Okay. So I think we're coming out on top here.
Absolutely. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Wow, you saved that so you classed it up. You took that turd, you polished it, you put some gold dust on it, and you really, really okay. Yeah, that was impressive.
Absolutely.
This is listeners. This is why Guardian Enzo is a much better human being than I am.
You're embarrassing me.
Well, at least I did something right this episode.
All right, there you go. That's true. Congratulations on that.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap up the discussion here. Obviously, this topic was a lot more interrelated with a lot of the stuff we talked about this episode, and I think that was both great, but it's also something that probably won't be a trend moving forward because we've been away for a long time, and it was a very topical conversation, and there's no way not to talk about COVID as it continues to affect us. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll switch to happier gears next week, but we'll keep checking in and see how the anime industry and our lives get affected by this thing. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll move on to the last final section, which is.
Listener questions.
And so we come to the end of this episode. And the last section we'll cover is listener questions. And since this is our first inaugural episode, we won't have any listener questions. But one question that I think anybody who's ever followed this podcast is asking, and so I'll ask that of the both of us, is why did we decide to come back? It's been 4 years since Notaku originally launched as a YouTube channel. And so I want to talk about why we decided to come back, my perspective on it, and then also your perspective on it. So, in contrast to the rest of the episode, I'll kind of go first here. Um, One of the reasons I think I started the idea of restarting this podcast is because I miss doing it, but more so than that, I'm a voracious consumer of podcasts. I follow like YouTube videos on anime. I do obviously podcasts on it as well. And there was something that I felt was missing and not available in the anime podcast space that I think I wanted to hear. And whenever I feel like I want something, I don't just go out and demand it. I try and actually do it myself if I can. So this is my attempt at kind of creating something in the world that I want, which is a more informative, more like intellectual, still kind of funny, but like intellectual podcast that kind of looks at the industry from a very like critical, intellectual lens, and then also kind of like, talks about the opinions and the stuff that we're used to. There's a lot of fun podcasts about anime around. Ones that are completely about goofing off and talking with your friends and stuff like that. And I think those are very valuable. But I also kind of want to like elevate the discussion a little bit in some ways and provide like an older perspective on anime that I think there's a lot of very old, like old as in like older people that watch anime. And I think we need our own space as well, along with all the youngins, the 20-year-olds and the 15-year-olds and the 18-year-olds. So that was my primary reason. I wanted to create the podcast that I would listen to, and so rather than restart this as a YouTube channel because we tried to do that before, I just jumped into wanting a podcast, and the reason we're doing not doing a YouTube channel is something for another time. But obviously YouTube, for people who watch YouTube, you've heard YouTubers complain about how YouTube handles copyright strikes and all that stuff, and that was the original reason I stopped investing the effort into doing Notaku. And so I didn't want to get back into that, and I don't think it can work in the current climate. It might change at some point and we might revisit that idea. But for now, I think I really enjoyed having a conversation with Guardian Enzo and talking about a lot of the things that we're passionate about. And I found that I'm still passionate about anime, so I want to talk about it, and I think I want to talk about it with both Guardian Enzo and a bunch of like-minded listeners. So that's the intention here, and that's my 3-minute rant on why I think I did this. So Guardian Enzo, why did you do this? Why? Please tell us.
Well, I for me, it's a couple of things. I mean, most obviously, I like to talk about anime, and I don't get that many opportunities to do it. Really, I write about it, but writing is a solitary activity by its very nature. And when you're passionate, I'm still passionate about anime too, and it's nice to be able to interact with people who it's fun to talk to and who have an opinions, some of which are the same, some of which are different, but which are well thought out and well reasoned. And so it's fulfilling to be able to have those conversations again. So I'm happy for that. And I guess the other aspect of it, I would say, is there are lots of perspectives on anime that are no more or less valid than mine, but I always feel especially now that my perspective is quite different than what you see represented in mainstream anime discussion. And especially because I think a lot of anime discussion right now is really anime promotion, and that's fine. But sometimes that line between promotion and journalism can get a little hard to see. And I think I bring something different to the anime perspective than most people in the industry do. And I want to be an advocate for certain beliefs and certain genres and certain sets of priorities within the industry that I feel are in on the endangered list and not well represented at the moment. And I think it's good that there are people out there that still make the case. And I want to be one of those people that make the case for what this medium can be, that it can be better than it is, that there are real and legitimate problems with it that can and should be addressed if there's a willingness to address them, and that the people who make anime should be respected and treated in a humane way that they are not, for the most part, being treated with right now. So while there's certainly room for people who want to talk about the most popular series that are out there, but there's always plenty of people who talk about those things. But if I want to be one of those people who talks about things that other people aren't generally talking about, because in a lot of cases, if I don't talk about them, nobody will. That's how I felt about some of the shows I've blogged over the years. I mean, there was certainly nobody else was going to blog Genga E Kickoff if I didn't do it, you know. So that's really where I come into it, is A, just enjoying the process of having these discussions, and B, you know, trying to espouse a certain approach to the medium that maybe is not getting a lot of airtime if I'm not, part of the process of doing it. So that's the opportunity that this presents for me.
Awesome, awesome. And I think, yeah, so you have our perspectives. Hopefully there were some people who enjoyed listening to us. We've updated ourselves a little bit, so we're going into this podcast with like a bigger investment this time. We're serious about it. We're going to try and hit every week unless something catastrophic happens, or some personal emergency happens, but our audio quality should definitely sound better now. We're focusing on the audio aspect very heavily, and so I think we'll try and do that one thing really well and see where it goes. And obviously, we're open to feedback. We will be interested in hearing what people have to say. So if you're interested, there's a couple of ways you can get questions to us that we will read in this section. One of the ways is obviously you can contact us at Twitter, at Setsuken or at Guardian Enzo, I believe.
Yes, at Guardian Enzo.
At Guardian Enzo, at Setsuken. Just tweet at us. We will talk about your question if you ask us something that you want read on Notaku. Otherwise, so we'll be releasing this podcast on a bunch of different services, all of them that we can manage. And if we don't, let us know by tweeting at us. So comment on any of those places there, and I will go around and compile those. And then finally, Guardian Enzo, one extra special perk for people who have been following you, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/Guardian Enzo. And the Patreon exists to support my website, lostinanime.com. And I'm very, very grateful to the Patreon supporters I have. But I would be happy to give my Patreon supporters first access. If you wanna tag me in Patreon, I'm going to send out a reminder to all of my Patreon supporters. But if you're a Patreon supporter, I'll make sure your questions and comments get on the air. I'm happy to do that. It's the least I can do. And again, that's patreon.com/Guardian Enzo.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and as we go through this journey, this hopefully happy journey, we will continue to create other avenues for you guys to interact with us if you so desire. And hopefully you do desire that.
Hopefully.
Um, yeah. So that's kind of it. That's the last section. So I guess, Guardian Enzo, we can wrap up and give our final thoughts for this episode. I just want to say I was super glad to get back to this. It's something you and I have discussed over the years since our huge hiatus, our 4-year hiatus of wanting to start up. And so I'm glad we're finally doing it again. And I am excited to do it every week and keep it going for as long as we can.
Me too. I'm happy to be back and excited to be working with you again, and grateful to you for being the driver behind this and doing most of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. And looking forward to many interesting conversations and especially to many interesting interactions with our listeners in the future.
Awesome. So the last thing I'll talk about is you can find me, Setsuken, on Twitter at Setsuken. You can also go to anime-evo.net. And over there, I'll be blogging ReZero and a couple of other series this season. You can go watch that. And then Guardian Enzo, where can people find your work?
They can find me on Twitter at Guardian Enzo. They can find me on my website, lostinanime.com. And I'm blogging some stuff right now. Not a lot this season for obvious reasons, but stuff like Fruits Basket and Fugo Keiji Balance Unlimited, and of course Major Second, Great Pretender when Netflix brings it back, and a couple of my old favorites, as I talked about earlier, Seirei no Moribito and Gurren Lagann.
Awesome. And with that, we will bid you adieu.
Adieu.
See you guys next time. And Guardian Enzo will be hosting next week. So
Wait, what? Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I'll figure something out.
Yeah, scared him there. But yeah, we'll alternate. So see you guys next week. I won't be in the host chair that time, so maybe things will be better. Let's hope.
A lot of pressure. Stay frosty.
Okay. Yep. Take care, guys. See you next time.